I'd like to dedicate this discussion to the woman who anointed, to the memory of the woman who anointed Yeshua when he was in Simon the leper's house. I also have a website, exodusx.com, and in this you can find this information that we're discussing now, and there are a lot more articles there. Again, it's the blessing, the curse, and the promise of restoration according to Torah. Every verse here is, at this point in this study, is dealing from the Torah. This is, my people are destroyed from lack of knowledge. 3 months after the children of Israel left Egypt, they arrived at Sinai, and there they entered into a covenant with Yehovah. And this covenant is equivalent to a marriage vow. A marriage vow with a performance clause, that is. These are the vows that that went between the children of Israel and Yehovah. Yehovah vowed to be their Elohim, and Israel would be his people. Brother Gregory?
I will walk among you and be your God, and you will be my people.
Yehovah promised the land as an inheritance.
Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "Command the children of Israel and say to them, when you arrive in the land of Canaan, this is the land which shall fall to you as an inheritance, the land of Canaan, according to its borders."
And this is the description of the land that's the promised land, that's being described in chapter 34 of Numbers. Now we're going to get into the performance clause. It's the blessing while in the land.
If you follow my statutes and observe my commandments and perform them, I will give you rain in your time, in their time. The land will yield its produce, and the tree of the field will give forth its fruit. Your threshing will last until the vintage, and the vintage will last until the sowing. You will eat your food to satisfy, and you will live in security in your land.
The curse while in the land. And this is based on not keeping the covenant.
But if you do not listen to me and do not perform all these commandments, and if you despise my statutes and reject my ordinances, not performing any of my commandments, thereby breaking my covenant, then I too will do the same to you. I will order upon you shock, consumption, fever, and diseases that cause hopeless longing and depression. You will sow your seed in vain, and your enemies will eat it.
This is Israel's vow to Yehovah.
So Moses came and told the people all the words of Yahweh and all the ordinances, and all the people answered in unison and said, "All the words that Yahweh has spoken, we will do."
So Moses worked down all the words.
And Moses wrote all the words of Yahweh, and he rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes of Israel.
So they had the vows, and now these words were documented, much like a wedding today. So the covenant, the Sinai covenant, basically was made at that time while in Sinai. All the books of Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus and Numbers were documented at that time while they were in Leviticus. I mean, in Sinai. They spent a year at Sinai. And part of that, they built the tabernacle. And they came down with the instructions for the priests. And they took a census of all the people. And they were ready to enter into the land of milk and honey, which was promised. Then we had the 12 spies that were sent out. And everybody, I believe, is aware of the story of the 12 spies. And what we see is that they were, the people wanted to go in and they didn't go in. And the father says, you aren't going in. You're going to go back in and stay in the wilderness. And you're going to, everybody over the age of accountability is going to perish in the wilderness. Then, after 40 years in the wilderness, again, they attempted to go into the land of milk and honey. But Moses gave them final instructions before going in.
Therefore, keep all the commandments that I command you this day, in order that you may be strong and come and possess the land to which you are crossing, to possess it.
And it was a repeat of the Sinai covenant, which we know is equivalent to a marriage vow with a performance clause. There's the blessing and the curse.
Behold, I set before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing, that you will heed the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim, which I command you today. And the curse, if you will not heed the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim, but turn away from the way I command you this day to follow other gods, which you did not know.
The blessings. Your days in the land will be prolonged.
Therefore, keep all the commandments that I command you this day, in order that you may be strong and come and possess the land to which you are crossing to possess it, and in order that you may prolong your days on the land that Yahweh swore to your forefathers to give to them and to their seed, a land flowing with milk and honey.
The blessings continue. There'll be no droughts while in the land. They'll have bumper crops while in the land. Herds will be increased while in the land.
And it will be, if you hearken to my commandments that I command you this day, to love Yahweh your Elohim and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, I will give the rain of your land at its time, the early rain and the latter rain, and you will gather in your grain, your wine, and your oil. And I will give grass in your field for your livestock, and you will eat and be sated.
No sickness while in the land, no miscarriages while in the land. Live to a ripe old age while in the land.
And you shall worship Yahweh your Elohim, and he will bless your food and your drink, and I will remove illness from your midst. There will be no bereaved or barren woman in your land. I will fill the number of your days.
Brother Gregory.
The blessings, enemies will fear you while in the land. No man will stand before you. Yahweh your Elohim will cast the fear of you and the dread of you on all the land upon which you tread, as he spoke to you.
The curses, if they don't keep the commandments while in the land. Now we're getting the bad news. The blessings is good news. The curses is the bad.
And it will be, if you do not obey Yahweh your Elohim to observe to fulfill all these commandments and statutes, which I am commanding you this day, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you.
Droughts and famines while in the land.
Beware lest your heart be misled and you turn away and worship strange gods and prostrate yourselves before them. And the wrath of Yahweh will be kindled against you, and he will close off the heavens, and there will be no rain, and the ground will not give its produce, and you will perish quickly from upon the good land that Yahweh gives you.
Plagues while in the land and diseases.
Then Yahweh will bring upon you and your offspring uniquely horrible plagues, terrible and unyielding plagues, and evil and unyielding sicknesses. And he will bring back upon you all the diseases of Egypt, which you dreaded, and they will cling to you.
Then you'll be defeated by your enemies while in the land.
Yahweh will bring upon you a nation from afar, from the ends of the earth, as the eagle swoops down, a nation whose language you will not understand, a brazen nation, which will not respect the elderly, nor show favor to the young. They will devour the fruit of your livestock and the fruit of your soil to destroy you. They will not leave over anything for you of the grain, wine, oil, offspring of your cattle or flocks, of your sheep, until they annihilate you. And they will besiege you in all your cities, and until your high and fortified walls in which you trust come down throughout all your land. And they will besiege you in all your cities throughout all your land, which Yahweh your Elohim has given you.
Then the survivors will be removed from the land and scattered to the nations.
And Yahweh will scatter you among all the nations from one end of the earth to the other. And there you will serve other deities, unknown to you or your forefathers, deities of wood and stone.
So what you have is the land of milk and honey, and then you have the land of the enemy. The Bible distinguishes it. There's the land of milk and honey. And if you're not in the land of milk and honey, you're in the land of the enemy.
And I will scatter you among the nations, and I will unsheathe the sword after you. Your land will be desolate, and your cities will be laid waste. Then the land will be appeased regarding its sabbaticals during all the days that it remains desolate while you are in the land of your enemies. The land will rest and thus appease its sabbaticals. It will rest during all the days that it remains desolate, whatever it had not rested on your sabbaticals when you lived upon it.
The curses continue while in the land of the enemy. Feel for hearts while in the land of the enemy.
And those of you who survive, I will bring fear in your hearts in the land of your enemies, and the sound of a rustling leaf will pursue them. They will flee as one flees the sword, and they will fall, but there will be no pursuer. Each man will stumble over his brother, fleeing as if from the sword, but without a pursuer. You will not be able to stand up against your enemies. You will become lost among the nations, and the land of your enemies will consume you.
Curses continue while in the land of the enemy.
And among those nations you will find no ease, and there will be no rest for the sole of your foot. Yahweh will give you there a trembling heart, failing of the eyes, and a fainting soul.
Example of these curses, natural disasters, wildfires, a lot going on in California lately, tornadoes, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, just to name a few, locust swarms.
You will take much seed out of the field, yet you will gather in little, for the locust will finish it.
We don't see this much in the United States, but it's common in Africa. Plagues.
Then Yahweh will bring upon you and your offspring uniquely horrible plagues, terrible and unyielding plagues, and evil and unyielding sicknesses.
This is only a taste of what's in front of us. Failing of the eyes.
And among those nations you will find no ease, and there will be no rest for the sole of your foot. Yahweh will give you there a trembling heart, failing of the eyes, and a fainting soul.
We have a lot of doctors that make a lot of money on, eye surgery, but also I'm noticing a lot of the people in this room, including myself, wear glasses. This is something we shouldn't even be. If we were in the land keeping the commandments, this would not be going on. So the question is being raised, why does Elohim do these things to us?
And it will be that you will say, for what reason has Yahweh our Elohim done all these things to us? You shall say to them, as you have forsaken me and worshipped foreign gods in your land, so shall you serve strangers in a land not yours.
Ephraim doesn't realize that he is in the land of the enemy.
Ephraim
I'm sorry.
has mixed himself among the peoples. Ephraim is like a cake not turned. Strangers have devoured his strength, and he does not know it. Gray hairs also are sprinkled upon him, and he does not know it.
Basically, the curses are signs that so that Ephraim will know that they are in the land of the enemy.
All these curses will befall you, pursuing you and overtaking you to destroy you, because you did not obey Yahweh your Elohim to observe his commandments and statutes, which he commanded you. And they will be a sign and a wonder upon you and your offspring forever.
There is a solution for these curses. The promise of restoration, returning to the land.
And it will be when all these things come upon you, the blessings and the curse which I have set before you, that you will consider in your heart among all the nations where Yahweh your Elohim has banished you, and you will return to Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul, and you will listen to his voice according to all that I am commanding you this day, you and your children. Then Yahweh your Elohim will bring back your exiles, and he will have mercy upon you. He will once again gather you from all the nations where Yahweh your Elohim has dispersed you.
The promise of restoration, returning to the land.
Even if your exiles are at the end of the heavens, Yahweh your Elohim will gather you from there, and he will take you from there. And Yahweh your Elohim will bring you to the land which your forefathers possessed, and you too will take possession of it. And he will do good to you, and he will make you more numerous than your forefathers.
Is it this? I would like to, this is the end of the article presentation. Did I lose you guys? Oh, okay, there we are. I'd like to just briefly go over a little bit more that's not part of the presentation. Is that okay?
Yeah.
To start. The idea about the curse, the idea behind this is that the children of Israel afterwards, as we just discussed, they were, they entered into an agreement with, a marriage covenant with Yehovah, and obviously they didn't keep it, and we know in 722 BC that the northern kingdom was captured by the Assyrians and scattered throughout the world. And then we see in 586 BC the southern kingdom, which is Judah, was conquered by the Babylonians. So the question I'm raising right now is, why did Yehovah allow this to happen to those, to Judah and to the house of Israel? Anybody?
Well, it says that Judah was even more treacherous than her sister, Jeremiah. But he did not cut her off into exile. He simply put her under punishment. He did not divorce her. He simply put her under a punishment. That's my understanding.
Seems like that there's a parallel between that passage, those passages, and what happened in this side of the world later on, because the people that wanted to first settle over here were Torah observant separatists, and they wondered what happened to the native population, because after 2 years, wherever they settled, the native population died off. And I remember the governor, William Bradford, he said in his sermon that this was for a better planting, that these natives died off because Elohim wanted to prosper the better planting. And I was going to save this, but I want to just ask about that. Do you think there's any validity to the groups that tell us that United States or North America is a set apart place for people of Elohim? I don't mean to
A
be off the
sympathetic part.
subject.
I I believe we're in the land of the enemy.
Okay.
And um, just this is a very good question. Okay, you're either in the land as described in Numbers, or you're outside the land, and which is the land of the enemy. And it's not to say that that Yehovah completely ignores us. In fact, he wants to bless us, but we're still in the land of the enemy and is constantly trying to get our attention. Failing of eyes, for example, and the diseases that we're experiencing and the natural disasters that are going on.
So this remnant that you talked about a couple of times, that is an exodus from the enemy's land back into the promised land?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I think that Jackson was referencing there are people who believe that the Western nations, because of their belief in Messiah, and because they maintain some semblance of a biblically ordered society, that there were certain blessings given upon them. And this is kind of what the Anglo-Israelists teach. They say that United States, if they try to trace those 10 tribes that were cut off, the remnants, they say that America is like Manasseh, and UK is like Ephraim. And at a time, we could say that there were certain blessings allowed upon those nations, but obviously in our current condition, they've completely turned their back on any kind of covenant relationship with the Father, the proliferation of LGBTQ, abortion, open Satanism being allowed in government. All of these have put a great curse. In fact, the Bible tells us that there is a ceremony during the days of the judges, where if a man's was slain and they could not find the slayer, then the elders were to come out of that city and they were to wash their hands and pray and ask the Father, forgive us of this blood guilt, because blood on soil creates guilt. It creates a voice. And when we look at the proliferation of the murder of the unborn all throughout Western nations, we're coming upon the kind of condition to whereby Israel was ejected out of the land and went into exile because of all the blood guilt. That's my thought there. I think Brother John has his hand up.
Yeah, I remember Yeshua saying, my kingdom is not of this world. So all the kingdoms of this world are antichrist and against Messiah, especially, as they move towards a one world order and a single government system and absolute control. So they're all headed in that direction. And the kingdom, although Israel is the geographic location where David had his kingdom, the real kingdom of Zion, Zion is coming down out of the heavenlies. It's a heavenly kingdom that will one day be in Jerusalem. The scriptures talk about an earthly Jerusalem and a heavenly Jerusalem, and they're two different things. And I think anybody who talks genetics is out of touch, because the seed that's planted in our hearts is a heavenly kingdom seed. Those who are of faith are the children of Abraham and heirs according to the promise. So, anybody, the Black Hebrew Israelites, the British Israelism, even Jewish Zionism, there's a lot of groups out there that are genetic centric, DNA centric. That's all antichrist system, ultimately to create second class citizens and justify the mass extinction of many peoples. So, that's my take on it. I just wanted to add my 2 cents.
Well, thank you for that comment, Brother John. The only two things that I would say with regard to your comments is that the Bible tells us that all the promises of Yahweh are yea and amen. If you look at Isaiah chapter 11, the second half, it clearly has not been fulfilled. I challenge you to show me anywhere where that has been fulfilled in the way that it's written. You'll have to check that to see what I'm talking about, but it's essentially a second Exodus scripture. The other thing is that there's promise.
Well, let me respond to that before you go to the second one. This greater Exodus comes when Yeshua comes down and sends the angels to gather his people from the four corners of the earth. So that's at the coming. I know some believe that that's already happened. I don't believe that. So that's gonna come. The second greater Exodus comes at the second coming, where he pours out his wrath on the wicked, and the righteous are gathered to Jerusalem. So I don't see that as any contradiction. I mean, I'll look at Isaiah 11 for more specificity, but that's what I would say to that.
Right. Well, right now
I would like to rebut.
Go ahead, brother.
Brother John. Yes, there's a lot of people see this as the second Exodus. But if you look in Revelation chapter 12, there is verses 6 and 14. The woman flees to a place prepared by Elohim, where she's going to be protected and fed for a period of 3.5 years, which is the 3.5 years prior to the second coming. So there is this gathering going on, and sometimes a lot of people think that it's the resurrection at the coming of Yeshua, but this 3.5 years takes place 3.5 years prior to that, and this is what this is addressing, this period of time beforehand where the gathering of the remnant is going to take place prior to the second coming.
And what about the fact that Yahweh is planning to make things very uncomfortable? A lot of the people, even when they came out of Egypt the first time, they still pined away for the flesh pots and for the more modern conveniences, even after they had come out of Egypt. Okay, and so what I'm hearing from Brother John, and maybe he doesn't intend this, is that we're fine where we at, but where we are at. But guess what? Maybe Yahweh has different ideas. Maybe he's going to make things so uncomfortable for you that he's going to force you to move out of those comfort places. And where are you going to go? If America is destroyed by a nuclear fire and there are a few remnants left, where are you going to go? There's only one place in the world that has anything approximating or even close to your beliefs. And guess what? That's Mount Zion. That's Mount Zion. So I think a lot of these, I think a lot of people think that they're just going to hang out and hope for the best. And maybe, some people believe that Yeshua's already turned 70 AD in this room. But if you're not one of those and you believe Yeshua is yet to return, their idea is, well, we're just going to hunker down. We're going to hunker down. But Yahweh has a way of making things extremely uncomfortable for people. And I believe that's what he's going to do. And a lot of that arrogance of, ethnocentric, country-centric arrogance is going to dissipate. And I think I can show that in Jeremiah too. That's my thoughts.
So you had a second point for John.
You'll need to unlock your
Gregory,
What's that?
you had a second point for John.
Oh, do I? Let me see where he's at here. Where's he? Did he put it in the text, or which didn't I?
No, you said you had 2 points, and John said, let me answer the first one.
Oh, okay. Yes, the second point. Okay. Oh, okay. So the last half of Isaiah, chapter 11, is clearly showing something that has not happened yet, and that has to do with Yahweh stretching his arm a second time. It also has to do with concepts of if it is true, which I believe with all my heart, and I believe Brother Guy Smith believes this as well as I've gone over his teaching, is that there's going to be a world power we're going to shift into a world power. And right now we're already seeing anti-Messiah, not just anti-Messiah, mind you, anti-Torah being encoded into law. It's going to make it very uncomfortable for believers, and many believers will be persecuted, I believe. This is what they want. You study the WEF, you study what they're saying. This is what they want for you. And so what is Yahweh? In other words, if you didn't understand the plan of Elohim, you would throw up your hands and say, we'll hunker down and we'll hope for the best. And that's what a lot of people, the attitude they have. But guess what? Our Heavenly Father has a plan in Isaiah chapter 11, the second half, where he's going to stretch his arm out a second time, and he's going to, by miraculous power, preserve his remnant. And where are they gonna go? Right now, see, a lot of people, maybe in this room, their heart is turned toward, we have a foundation of Elohim, the Pilgrims, the Puritans. Yeah, things will get better in America, right? Things will get better. But what if that doesn't happen? If that doesn't happen, then Isaiah chapter 11 says he's going to gather a remnant, just like he did the first time, bringing them out of Egypt. There's going to be a lot of reluctant people, just like there was the first time. But things are going to be so uncomfortable that in the moment, they're going to want to get out. Where are they going to go? There's a scripture that says, then they realized they had idolatry. They threw away their idols, and they said, let us go up to Zion. Let us go up to Zion. That's the only place. And there's people probably in this room that believe that the Jews are going to be run out. I hate to disappoint you. They're not going to be run out of Zion. At worst, half the city is going to be taken and the women raped. At worst. But Yahweh, when that happens, Yahweh says he goes to fight against those nations. He goes to fight against them and defends his remnant. Why? Because he hasn't cast the Jews away. They're simply in punishment for not believing his son. It's simply in punishment. So those who say spiritual Zion, that all sounds fanciful now, but wait until you can't get food or water, and there's but one path for your family, for your wife, for your children. I'm going to put it down in bare terms for you. This is what's going to happen. I truly believe this, and I think Brother Guy would agree with me on that.
Well, yes, I agree with you, brother. I know this, doesn't sound, pleasant, but this is, Yeshua has forewarned us of this in his kingdom parables. And anyways, what I would like to, do we have the time? Do we still have more time?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Um, I wanted to go over the curses a little bit more because we went over it, but I think it's important to understand. After King Solomon, when he died, the 12 tribes of Israel divided into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was made up of 10 tribes, and the southern kingdom was made up of Judah and Benjamin, and that we call that the Judah. And again, in 722 BC, the northern kingdom fell to the Assyrians. And based on what happened, the marriage covenant that was that we just went over, the northern kingdom fell to the Assyrians because they weren't keeping Torah. But before the Assyrians came in to conquer them, there were plagues and there were diseases. And you could go back and you can read in the prophets, specifically like Isaiah and Jeremiah, and you will see that there were these plagues. And the plagues themselves were a warning that if they did not keep get back to the covenant, then the next step was going to be the army, which was the Assyrians, and they did not get back into keeping the covenant. And the Assyrians came, conquered them, and scattered them to the four corners of the earth. Then, 586 BC, same thing happened to Judah. Prior to the fall of the Jerusalem to the Babylonians, you had your plagues and your diseases and your famines, and then the people still did not turn back, and then Babylon came and conquered them and carried them to Babylon. Now, after 70 years, they returned to the land, and returned to the land based on the promise of restoration, which we read in Deuteronomy. So let's look how this thing plays out. When Yeshua was here, he was going around healing people. What are some of the diseases that he healed? Anybody?
I would say cancer would be one of them. One of the diseases of
Probably, but what was documented in the Gospels?
Inflammation.
Okay. Any other ones?
Demon possession. I don't know if that's a disease.
Now we're starting to get warmed up. Who else? Come on.
Blindness, mute,
Blindness.
lame.
What else?
leprosy. Leprosy was a big one.
Big time. Why did they have these diseases?
Is it because they were not indeed keeping the food laws, or is it because they were acting in a way contrary against the messengers that Yahweh would send them? Is it because they had a culture that was infiltrated by Romans and Greeks due to the previous campaigns of those nations? And like in the book of Maccabees, a lot of the Jews turned to Greek ways, meaning maybe they turned to eating unclean. That was my initial thought.
They weren't keeping the commandments. They were breaking the covenant. So Yeshua, as a prophet, came in and they said, just like all the prophets before him, repent, turn back to the Father. Repent. Because if you don't repent, then he's going to send in an army. That was the next step, right? So the next step was, well, they ended up killing John the Baptist and they ended up killing Yeshua, like they did the prophets prior to them. And then in 70 AD, the Romans came in and conquered him based on the agreement, the prenuptial agreement in the Sinai covenant. So here we are today. Anybody see any diseases and things like that that are also going on and in Israel?
Well, yeah, on social media, there's a lot of skin diseases, a lot of them because they took the mRNA shot, breaking out on horrible skin diseases. It's very frightening to see what's happening on Twitter and other social media.
Israel was not immune to COVID at all. You still see problems with lifestyles in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, LGBTQ is big in Tel Aviv, and that breeds disease, impurity and disease.
Paul.
Yeah, I just want to say from my research that I've done, most of the diseases that are happening in this world today are manufactured. They're not like existing in the world. They have been manufactured by the evil elite to reduce the population. And so like COVID and all this other stuff, from what I researched, does not exist. It's something that has been created. It's been put that from the time we were little kids, eating toxic food, breathing toxic air, and just having toxicities in our body, which causes inflammation, which we get sick from the inside out because of all the junk that we have been forced to take. So we definitely do need Yahushua to watch over us and to heal us and to do the best we can with the foods that are available to us that we can actually eat and stay healthy. And that's close to like maybe 90% we can get there, the best efforts. The rest and all of it has to be dependent upon Yahushua. So anyway, that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Paul. The point is that they have eye problems too. They have natural disasters also. They aren't immune to it. And the reason that they're not immune to it is because they aren't keeping the commandments, just like they didn't do it prior to 70 AD and they didn't do it prior to 586 BC.
Yeah, I think that Yeshua brought that up too. Didn't he highlight that even in the first century? He said that, they didn't care for the poor. They did not, honor father and mother. Instead, the money that they ordinarily would have set aside for helping their mother and father, they had this device in place called Korban, where they could abrogate that commandment and just give that money to the temple. Maybe that would buy them favor or standing in the synagogue in some way. And their mother and father went without that money and support. And there were many such things that they did against Torah.
Well, the idea, thank you, Gregory, the idea behind it is that they're still in conflict. Do their enemies fear Israel? Like we just got through with a conflict through Hamas, and I don't know if it's still going on or not. It could be, and just what little information we're getting through. But all these things are pointing toward what? It's pointing toward another larger conflict that's going to take place in Israel.
Yeah, they are contemplating against Hezbollah, which is connected to Iran. And Iran has been making threats. That would be a much larger, that would require the United States military, which has been committed by the current president, to defend in such a scenario. That would be a much wider conflict. Russia would get involved too. It would be downhill from there, war-wise. Yeah. They don't have safety from their enemies at all.
Their enemies definitely don't fear them. So, anyways, I just wanted to, I know this is kind of, not make you feel warm and fuzzy inside, but this is what the prophets are teaching us. I'm just repeating what's in the scriptures. And we need to know and need to understand that this is what Yeshua was actually conveying in his, kingdom parables. And this is what's in front of us.
But isn't there a message of hope in the second Exodus? Isn't that the hope that we can have, that the Father will again stretch his hand out a second time and gather the remnant of the survivors after these desolations that may engulf the entire world?
This is the idea behind the gathering of the remnant. This is the idea behind the gathering of the remnant. In other words, Yeshua, he stated, I can't tell you the exact verse, but he stated that his coming would be as the days of Noah. And if you look at in the days of Noah, if you take a closer look at what happened with Noah, Noah was first forewarned of the extinction level event we call the flood. And then he was provided with divine survival instructions. So, and Noah, here's the thing about it. This was a test of faith for Noah. And if he had not followed those instructions, which was to build the ark, then he too would have succumbed to the flood. And what people don't realize is that we are also being forewarned. We see these warnings as the apocalyptic horsemen and the vials of wrath. But what we don't really don't realize is that we're also being provided with divine survival instructions for individuals to actually be alive at the coming of Yahuwah. And this is what is being conveyed in the kingdom parables Yeshua was talking about, and also the Old Testament prophets. So, and all that information is, you can find that information on, exodusx.com. So I'm done.
Well, thank you, brother.
Okay, thank you, sir. We'll call upon the Heisen. Go back to our liturgy and close the service. Thank you for those words. Of course, we're living in New Testament times now, where the old has passed away, and according to Hebrews, there's a certain group that has been disregarded because of their disobedience. Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu is one, Yahweh.
We will love Yahuwah Elohim with all our hearts, with all our souls, and with all our stuff. And these words that Yahuwah commands us will be in our hearts, and we will teach them diligently to our children, and we'll talk of them when we sit in our houses, and we walk down the road, and when we recline, and when we arise, and we bind them for a sign upon our hands, and they will be ornaments between our eyes. And you will write them on the supports of our houses and even on our gates.
Zakar, remember, when you became the Yahad of Israel, you vowed to separate yourselves from the sessions of the deceitful ones in order to depart into the wilderness to prepare the way of Yahweh. As it is written, in the wilderness, prepare the way of Yahweh, make level in the desert a highway for our Elohim. This alludes to the study of Torah and Kadosh writings that Elohim commanded through Moshe, giving us that which is sufficient for us to live according to everything that has been revealed from time to time, and according to what has been revealed to the prophets by his Kadosh Ruach.
And all this we gladly hear and joyfully do. Last words.
And so we, creatures of clay, kneaded with water, a heap of dust and a heart of stone, for what virtue are we reckoned to be worthy of this? For into an ear of dust you have put a new word, and have engraved everlasting things on hearts of stone. You have caused straying spirits to return, that they may enter into covenant with you and stand before you forever, even in the everlasting abode, illuminated with perfect light forever, and no more darkness, for unending moeds of joy and unnumbered ages of peace. Shalom, shalom.
And let it so be unto us and our generations by your word, for the Master's sake, and for the sake of all creation. Amen and shalom, shalom.
Man, the service is finito. And before we go into Brother Greg's time, if we're still doing that, if anyone wants to make any announcements concerning their ministry, this would be a good time for you to do that. Any upcoming services during the week that you want us to be a part of?
Yeah, we can do that this week. I can do the discussion period. We do have midweek manna. So we're looking for a speaker, and I think we do have the Health Minute. Sister Sandra Watley sent me a nice document. She plans to present the Health Minute next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll try to find a watchman and find a speaker as well. This interesting, and I think this. Let me respond to this comment here. Melissa, she says, if the WEF is a Jewish group, they're not Jewish. When we say Jewish, the Bible tells us that Judah yet ruleth with Elohim. Any Jew who does not observe the 10 Commandments is not a Jew. They've cut themselves off from the covenant. We know this aptly. The WEF is not a Torah organization. It is an LGBTQ baby murdering Moloch organization. It is pagan to the core. Just because they have some last name that sounds like Stein doesn't make them Jewish. Okay. So clearly, now the other thing to think about here is this idea that somehow Sunday is going to be stopped. And the Sabbath, these naughty Sabbath keepers like us will be, or rather the Sunday will be, stopped. And then the naughty Sabbath keepers are going to flourish across the world is completely counter to all of history. The Gentile nations never adopted Sabbath. Sabbath is one of those things that sets his people apart from pagans. Okay, so it's not going to be, if anything, it'll be a Sunday law. I think the Seventh-day Adventists could be right about this. They think that the mark, at least in a religious sense, could be a Sunday law, which was anti-Torah, and that was inaugurated in Nicaea and Laodicea, where they basically created anathemas against those who kept the seventh-day Shabbat. Now, if there's those who are so foolhardy to suggest that the fourth commandment was only given at Sinai, I challenge you, go back to the garden. It was established in the garden. Okay, that was way before Sinai. So people who venerate Sunday over the Sabbath, they are out of compliance with our Father's cycles. And so that's why we at the Yahad, we reverence the Sabbath as part of that covenant of return to our Father's ways. Yeah, that's right, Lauren. That's right. They did. In fact, there was Sabbath keepers early on. And guess what? They didn't keep Christ Mass. Did you know they didn't keep Christ Mass? That's what that means. Christ Mass. Study the term Mass. Okay, it's two words in conjunction. This is where we get Christmas. Okay. It was actually forbidden. It wasn't until the Irish. I've made this point before, but there's some people that have a hard time getting the history of this nation in there. A lot of that came later when the Irish came in, and they were very, very Catholic. Okay, so what was this other comment here? Esau, Edom mixed with the Judeans to become Jews, Herod and his offspring in Edom. Okay, so here's what I say to that. Okay, if they are acting like an Esau, if they're acting like an Edom, if their practices are such as Edom and Esau, then yeah, they're Edom and Esau. But if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it flaps its wings like a duck, it's a duck. Okay, what do I mean by that? Okay, so if a Jewish person, someone who claims to be Jewish, okay, if they are honoring the Sabbath, if they are reverencing the name, now maybe they're not really in compliance with that, totally, but they have hedges in place to protect misuse of the name. So that seems to imply some sort of reverence at least. And they don't, in their own home and in their own practice, they don't have idols. If they are not, out there murdering, apart from proper judicial process where there's the death penalty is part of that. If they are not out there mixing their seed where two men put their seeds in the womb of a woman, that's adultery. They're not doing that kind of stuff like all the Gentiles do a lot of places, these party environments. Okay, if they're keeping those things, guess what? They become as one of the tribes of Israel, even if they have foreign extraction.